Oh, there we go. Looks like it's looks like it's working now. Hello, everyone. Thank you. If you're watching this, just checking. Oh, okay. Okay. So I thought what I would do is go through Carl Jung's Black Books. I thought we'd just do a little reading, live reading. Um, but because no one's really on here yet, I might just I don't know, just talk for a little bit before just to wait to see if some people actually come on, and then I'll go through the reading, but that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go through some of the Black Book reading together and, see what happens in the chat. But, yeah, lately, I've been working a lot, so that's why I haven't really created many videos, but I really hope I can because I've got quite a lot of ideas buzzing around, and each year I'm always learning different things. Hey, nice to see you. Biha. Hey man, how you going? From Ethiopia. Oh, that's awesome, man. What's happening in Ethiopia? I've seen you comment on some of my videos before. So yeah, I really appreciate your support, man. I'm glad that some of my videos could help. So um yeah, and I'm grateful actually for my audience. Um my channel's quite fragmented. I haven't been very consistent. Um, but I still feel that I've seen a consistent presence of certain people who have watched my videos, so I'm very grateful for that. So yeah, I've been studying a little bit of symbols of transformation, um, which is really good, and I've been kind of looking into other ideas. So I recently listened to an audiobook on from Aldous Huxley, and Jung actually criticizes Aldous Huxley in some certain ways, which is interesting. But it's interesting because Aldous Huxley obviously um, writes the famous book, A Brave New World, and it's something interesting about that fictional story because he was kind of doing, I guess, a thought experiment on society and just reflecting on society I think is really important. So as much as a lot of my videos are about reflecting on yourself, I think also reflecting on the world, reflecting on how things actually work and operate in the world is really important because it enables us to, I guess, also further reflect on ourselves because we contrast ourselves with the world. And for all of us, that's always going to be a problem. If you look basically at Christianity, the whole idea of the kingdom of God is that you kind of forsake the world to pursue the kingdom of God within. And so there's something interesting about that, where the devil comes and tempts Jesus on the mountain and tempts him. What does he tempt him with? He tempts him with the kingdoms of the world. And so there's something interesting about this dynamic and this interplay between the individual and the world within our psychology. And always found that fascinating because myself, I've always found it troublesome to, um, I guess, in some sense, find my place in the world. Because if you have certain experiences, you feel kind of out of place or out of step with, you know, um, much of what goes on in the world, I guess. And it's hard to find other people where you feel that you can connect with together and relate together. So I think a lot of people who are seeking, spiritual things, seeking kind of more that inner meaning in life, um, have found difficulty out in the world I think that's a very common experience that we have. So it's like this archetypal problem that we have. It's not just an experience, it's actually an archetypal problem because you have to reconcile yourself with the world at some point. And that can happen in many different ways. And normally, you integrate into society and you adapt kind of in a normal or so-called normal way where you do all the standard things society kind of tells you to do. And that's those are all good things because that keeps your life afloat. It enables you to have the basics of your life kind of set up. But what that also means is you're giving your uh, your mind and yourself over to someone else or to the collective in a sense. So if you work for someone else, for example, there's nothing wrong with that. That's very good. I work for someone else, and that's good. But there is, if you think about it, um, you are subjected to other people's ideas all the time, and there's nothing wrong with that. Ultimately, you always will be, right? So even if you run your own enterprise, you have your own clients and your own people. So I'm not saying that you have to be a monk in a cave. I mean, if that's what you want to do, then that's what you want to do. Um, but I guess my point is that um, there is this idea of creating yourself and creating something from yourself and out of yourself. And ultimately, in order to do that, you have to um, solve the problem between you and the world. And so I think that's something very interesting. And so, for example, Jung, when he did his black books, he said um, when he was doing this, these experiments, these inner experiments that he went on, these inner journeys he went on, um, he had to make sure he had his number one personality that was grounded in the world. And the number one personality, had a job, had a responsibility, had a family, had a place to live. And, I mean, Jung was actually rich, right? He was actually a really wealthy person. He married um, one of the most wealth into a family that was really wealthy who owned IWC, which is a famous watch company in Switzerland. And then also, obviously Jung himself also had some high profile clients who paid him quite a lot of money, a lot of money. I think even I think the wife of is it Alan Daly's? Anyway, one of the founders of the original before the CIA. Anyway, one of the intelligence agencies in America, his wife, Dooley's, I believe, um, Jung treated his wife. And so he had high profile clients. He was rich. He had enough money that he was able to go and do what he wanted to do. And Jung had this advice. He said, for especially for creative people, he said, you need to pay a price. You need to exchange something of value um, that gives you freedom from the world. And it makes sense because if you want to explore yourself, uh, you have to realize you aren't an island. You are connected to other people. Um, and so by default, you have to offer up some value to exchange um, that hopefully will be accepted so you can basically live your life. For example, Jung we would not have all the works from Jung if he didn't have that position in life in the world. So there has to be um, there is for every person it will look different. But in some way we all wrestle through this archetypal idea of struggling and reconciling ourselves with the world. And so, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, um, we can see it in Christianity with the idea of the kingdom of God and forgoing the world. We can see it in Jung's personal life and how he went towards his creating his own work and his advice that he gives up to us, his psychological insights. Um, and we can see it also, in some sense, in Nietzsche in his teachings, like creating and being your own self. There's a famous quote by Nietzsche that says, "No, there is no price too high to pay for to no price too high to pay for owning your own self," something like that. Um, and that's really true. So I guess part of this is about exploring. Part of it's exploring the depth. That's what Jung was trying to do with the black books. He was trying to understand himself, but at the same time, he had his number one personality as well. That was much rooted in the world. So yeah, maybe I'll go read through this. Six people online. That's pretty good for now. How are you guys going? From Phoenix, without the self immolation. Well, maybe. Yes. Water on Mars. Oh, from Pueblo, Colorado. Nice. Hello. Welcome. Nice to see you. It's quite late here, so for me, this is a bedtime story. For you, it may be a wake up, a morning hello. So that's good. Yeah, maybe we will go through some of this. So let's go through it. All right. So this is book two of Jung's Black Books, and oh wow, you're an early riser. Very well, that's good. Um, yes, book two of Jung's Black Books. Basically, book one has like a large introduction to the Black Books, and so there's some very interesting stories here, or Jung's fantasies that he wrote down in his journal. Okay, so I'm gonna read some of it now. November 12 to December 29, 1913. So this is very early on in Jung's life. A huge task lay before me. I saw its enormous size and its value, and meaning escaped me. I got into the dark, and I groped along my path. That path led inward and downward. My soul, where are you? Do you hear me? I speak. I call you. Are you there? I have returned. Here I am again. I have shaken the dust of all the lands from my feet, and I have come to you again. I am with you. After long years of long wandering, I have come to you anew. Shall I tell you everything I have seen, experienced, and drunk in? Or do you not want to hear about all the noise of life and the world? But one thing you must know. The one thing I have learned is that one must live this life. This life is the way, the long, sought after way to the unfathomable, which we call divine. There is no other way. All other ways are false paths. I found the right way, and it led me to you, to my soul. I return, tempered and purified. Do you still know me? How long the separation lasted? Everything has become so different. And how did I find you? How strange my journey was. What words should I use to tell you on what twisted paths a good star has guided me to you? Give me your hand, my almost forgotten soul. How warm the joy at seeing you again, you long forgotten, long disavowed soul. Life has led me back to you. Let us thank the life I have lived for all the happy and all the sad hours, for every joy and every pain, for every hope and every disappointment. All were stations on the path towards you, my soul. I found you again. I would like to know I will stay with you. My journey should continue with you. I will wander with you and ascend to my solitude, no longer alone as before and greedy and impatient, but with comforting courage and quiet delight. All right, so I'll stop there. That's the first entry in this second diary. So, like I was saying before, is there's this reconciliation between you and the world. There's also this hidden part of yourself. And I love it where he basically is talking about finding his soul. And I feel in our lives, you may have a similar experience that you're just living your regular life. You have different trials and different issues that come up that you have to work through. You know, relationships, there's always problems and issues to overcome in relationships. There's always a problem when it comes to the world in general. That's why, for example, you know, there's governments, there's all sorts of different things going on. Everyone's trying to solve a problem out there. And in amongst all that noise, a lot of what we're searching for is our soul. And he talks of it as, no, I will stay with you. And he said, I will wander with you and ascend to my solitude. So there's something about being alone that is so important because oftentimes when you're out there and you're around other people begin to influence you. You know, they influence what you think, they influence how you act, they influence your mind. Um, and so I think there's something interesting about that, being conscious of the influence of other people over you, um, especially those closest to you. Your family is where you kind of begin looking at that influence. And actually, what's interesting is when you look at the Bible, even just in a, you know, when you're looking at it in a psychological way, Jesus actually says in one passage, at least, to hate your family, to hate your family. Now, I know that sounds pretty extreme, and I wish I had prepared my notes, but I do remember quite clearly looking it up and reading about it. And yes, so Jesus says to hate your family, essentially, but it's because you're not meant to um, value anything above the, the pursuit of the kingdom of God. And Jung's psychological interpretation of the kingdom of God and of Christianity is that um, the kingdom of God is actually the domain. So kingdom is like a king's domain. The domain is the domain of the soul. And so when Jung is talking in here and he's talking about his finding his soul and calling out to his soul, it's in all essence, it's the same as what is taught in the Christian scriptures of finding the kingdom of God. Um, and yes, did Jung say Jesus lacks the dark side? Yes, Jesus as a symbol of the archetype of the self lacks the dark side, and the dark side in Christianity is personified as the devil. Um, and so in, you know, the Christian mythos, it's seen as the dark side is seen as separate, and the good overcomes the dark side, but inevitably the dark side is still there. So even after the triumph of Calvary, for example, after say Jesus is risen from the dead, for some reason we still have issues and problems here on earth. So you would think that you know, we would be able to usher in the kingdom straight away, but for whatever reason, 2000 years later we still have pain and suffering. And so that's why, for example, Jung talked about the alchemists were trying to, you know, find the philosopher's stone, find the elixir of life, find the alchemical equations, so to speak, to create, um, you know, to be able to create this oneness back with God. And Jung points out that evidently there is, so the work isn't complete for some reason. Um, so I guess that's why you have to look at it from the psychological perspective. And, I used to be like a literalist Christian, and I guess I can share a little bit about that story. Um, which, I was going to do a whole video on, but every time I go to do it, I always think to myself, geez, what am I saying? Like, because you don't want to, I don't want to misrepresent myself, really. I want to do myself like justice, because what you really believe is so personal. And I'm quite an open person. So what I believe can change, and obviously it has changed a lot. But I'm just saying, I understand the literalist Christian viewpoint, but my mind has been expanded um, since then, and I guess originally I came across Jordan Peterson years ago, way like before he was famous, actually. In 2015, I came across Jordan Peterson. So this is not only before he was famous, but before he even got brought up in all that political stuff. I was watching his Maps of Meaning, um, lectures, and at that time I was a literalist Christian, I would say, but I'd met an atheist woman and I started dating her, and so we were having arguments naturally, because she's atheist. She was like, she loved Hitchens, Christopher Hitchens, and and it was challenging for me because I had always grown up, uh, you know, kind of believing in God in a literal sense. Um, and then what happened was it was a big challenge to me, dating this atheist. I don't know. I just met her and we really got along though, and we got along so well, more than any other person I'd been out with. And so it was really interesting. And before that, I had done the Myers Briggs, and the first time I ever did the Myers Briggs test, I actually cried, because as I was talking about earlier in the live stream, I was, reconciling trying to figure out how to reconcile myself with the world, and in doing that, I kept doing all these different things and failing again and again and again in my life. In my early 20s, I would do something for a year, then I'd quit, then I'd try something else, and I'd quit. Um, and I would try all these different things, and then I was like, "What the hell's wrong with me?" So I looked up a personality test because I was like, "What job is best for me for me? Because I just can't keep doing this, you know." And so this is part of the journey of my self discovery when I was younger. And when I read my personality type, which is extroverted intuitive, I actually I cried. I just cried, Um, so when I'd met this atheist um woman who I ended up dating, I we got along a lot because we talked about Myers Briggs a lot. So that's why I talked about that. And so there was something to that that I found really compelling that hit me deep. And the reason why I never in the beginning kind of questioned my literalist Christianity was because it was coherent within itself. As long as you didn't explore around outside, it had a good coherency within itself. And every time someone would ask me a question, I could always come up with an answer, you know, and so I thought to myself, well, you know, the explanatory power is quite strong, but I didn't think of it just intellectually. I really thought of it through an inner experience. See, because I had this a series of dreams, and I've never shared all this information really. So I guess you've got me talking now. So I might as well share it. But I have a dream journal that goes back um over 11 years. And every night I write my dreams down in my phone, and I can look up right now any symbol, any word, like, I can look up mother, and then I've seen every single dream that has my mother in it or the word mother in it. Um, and it's really useful, especially when you bank up 10 years of a dream journal. It's like extraordinarily useful. I'm telling you, like, it's things like this that have brought me over to appreciating Jung more and more and make me take Jung so seriously. It's like when you have your own personal experience of meaning and of like how things influence your life, and I guess what Jung would call synchronicity, you can't deny it. When you experience the unconscious and it begins to basically talk back, you you can't deny it. So back to the story is basically I was dating this atheist, and yes, then so my faith was kind of tested, right? And then I found Jordan Peterson not because he talked about religion, but because I was interested in personality, remember? And Peterson has lectures on the Big Five, which is one of the most prominent personality lectures. Um, and so I just think, yeah, and then so I was listening to him and I was like, okay, this guy does not have your typical negative attitude towards Christianity, although he seems to believe heavily in science and he seems to really care about evolution and all this stuff naturally. And so basically from 2015 um all the way till I guess now, but like probably till about 2017, because Peterson got really famous then, and then I kind of stopped watching it. But like for those few intense years, I was really invested in that, and I was also, but at the same time, I was looking up philosophical arguments, like William Lane Craig, and I was learning about philosophy from like a Christian apologetics thing. But I didn't, I don't want to go around being like that. I was just trying to understand. Okay, like if I'm going to be challenging my beliefs, I need to understand what is the arguments for kind of God and all this. But you know what happened really is Peterson kind of just, I guess, allowed me to open up a little bit more and be like, okay, I can't just ignore this other information out here. I have to like, I was never like against the information. I just always was kind of like ignorant, I guess. And I just stuck within I was young, I was like my early 20s. So I was just kind of like in my own zone, I guess, like reading the the Bible and nothing else. But then I started to explore more things, and because of that um impactful experience I had with reading my personality type, and then learning about Jung, I thought, well, I need to learn more about Jung because you obviously Peterson's stuff is just built on like Jung, what Jung is saying. And what really touched me was an extension of Jung's work through the Myers Briggs and personality types. And so I guess part of this is kind of the journey to looking for my soul, you know. Um and so yeah, because I had those experiences before I knew about Jung with dreams. So what happened was one night I went to this Christian place, and like I said, I have an 11-year dream journal. But you wanna know how it started? It basically started I went to this Christian this Christian meeting. It sounds weird, and this meeting went for hours. It went for, like, way longer than normal because we had, like, these guest speakers or something, and, these guest speakers were basically talking about dream interpretation, and, they were praying for everyone, whatever, it's like a Christian thing, and, I don't go to church anymore at all, but anyway, I went home that night, and I had this very distinct dream, and the dream was just a voice, and it said, "New wine, new wine, new wine." It said "new wine" 3 times. It sounds mental, really, but I'll tell you, after that, after I had that dream, I dreamed every night for 2 years straight, mostly 5 times a night, like 5 dreams, like whole dream series every night for 2 years straight, and I, recorded most of it, and so that was, like, my very early 20s before I even got to, you know about personality type, and then and then explore Jung more, and so going a bit further forward, as I was exploring Jung more, I started to realize, okay, maybe God is just like in our psychology and doesn't actually exist out there anywhere, you know? Um, and so talk to us about you. After all, you are not only the person who dates atheists, your journey is our in some way. You have no idea the time I got your Dark Night of the Soul lecture. Oh, thank you so much. Um, yes. So about me. So basically, um, my what happened? Yes. So my journey through my faith, I guess, is I started to, listen to Jordan Peterson, and that got me onto Jung. But before that, like I said, I was really touched by the personality test in Myers Briggs. And then as I read Jung, I began to see that the explanatory power of his kind of understanding, like the psychological interpretation of God, explained all of my past experiences that I had before as a Christian. And that's really why I didn't want to let it go because I was like, there's some inner truth, some inner experience that I'm actually having here that although I can't explain rationally what's going on, I know I'm experiencing something and no one else that I know can explain this feeling or experience. And not even other Christians really. They didn't really get all the time. Some of them did, but some of them didn't. And so, but Jung explained the inner experience like he did just then when we read out Jung's search, finding his soul in the Black Book journals. And I had a better framework now for understanding the world. And I was like, this makes way more sense than what I believed before as a literalist Christian. And then I began, I don't know, like years ago, I created a video, a few videos. One's called The Deeper Meaning of Introversion, Carl Jung and the Deeper Meaning of Carl Jung's Deeper Meaning of Introversion, and another one called The Secrets to Knowing and Discovering Yourself or something like that. And basically in those videos, I outline the idea of finding the kingdom of God within you. And the mystic, um, uh, Mr. Eckhart, he is a Christian mystic, and he interprets it, as I said earlier in the stream, as the kingdom of God is within you. It is the soul, the domain of the soul. And as I understood that interpretation, I started reading the Bible more through the psychological interpretation that Jung provides us. And the explanatory power was just increased massively. And I just thought to myself, I haven't lost my inner experience. I haven't lost my soul, in other words. Um, I've retained my soul, but changed my outer beliefs that explain both my inner experience and what it means outwardly. And then what happened was I became more open to other religions. So I was open now to any religion. It's really the perennial philosophy, like I mentioned earlier, when I was reading Aldous Huxley, he also writes a book called The Perennial Philosophy. And so I was going through I listened to his audiobook on the doors of perception on taking mescaline. And so I think it's really interesting, this crossover, this space that Jung plays in, with a crossover of psychology with religion and philosophy as well, because he talks very much about um, Schopenhauer and Nietzsche. So there is even the Greeks. So there's a crossover between these different disciplines, this interdisciplinary work, and it was just so explanatory. The power of Jung's work really gripped me, I guess, and that's why I kind of followed down that road. But as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I said to myself, I had this point where I thought, well, if Jung is kind of agnostic and we don't really know if God is ultimately real beyond our experience, then maybe it's not real and it's just some like kind of delusion. But what happened to me is like I was going to make a video on this and I probably will. I don't know. Every time I try to make a video on my real personal beliefs, it always feels really weird. And I try to think about doing it and then I just back out and I just feel weird about it. Because there's something weird about like kind of, I don't know, sharing your personal understanding of things and opening it up for critique. But you know, I guess it's good to be authentic as well. But I don't know, somehow I got talking, I don't know. But basically my what was I talking about? Yeah. So at that point where I thought, oh, I don't know if God really exists, right? Because I've experienced this new way of thinking. And then I was kind of content with that. And I was happy with that. I was like, okay, well, whatever. I don't know. How do I know? I can't understand the world. It's too big for me to understand. But as I kind of felt that way, I had the dream. And all the dream was very simple dream. Very, very, very simple. But I immediately knew what it meant. And the dream was simply that the ground was collapsing from underneath me. And instantly, I would say after that dream, I can't even explain it, but I just instantly believed, or I just knew that there was a God. That's how I felt. That's how I felt anyway. I felt like there was a God after that. I just felt like, I don't know. I can't understand how I feel. I just feel something now, and I don't know. In Christianity, they call that like some faith that they were given or something. But I don't know. It feels like some inner knowing. Um, So I don't know. It feels weird to say something like that, but that's just what happened. That's just how I experienced it. I had this weird dream with the ground falling underneath me, and then after it, I just felt stronger. Like, no, I believe in God now. I don't know why, and I think that's kind of like what Jung's getting at here, in a certain sense. He's finding his soul, and I think that's something interesting. You know. So I'll read on a little bit here. So this is the next passage. I am weary, my soul, and lay my head on your shoulder. Wandering has lasted too long. My search for myself outside of myself. Now I have gone through events and found you behind all the far ago. For on my straying through this far ago, I discovered humanity in the world. I found men and with you, my soul, I found again, first in images within men, and then for real, how you are. I found you where I believed you, the furthest away from me, where God forced me to surrender, blindfolded, and to lose myself. There you climbed out of golden shafts, and I found you again. You announced yourself to me in advance in dreams, which were dark to me, and which I sought to grasp in my own inadequate way. You know these dreams, how they burned in my soul and drove me to all the boldest acts of daring and forced me to push for the steepest summits. Yes, even to rise above myself. You let me see truths and enjoy your solemn bliss, of which I had no previous inkling. You let me undertake journeys whose endless length would have scared my consciousness beyond rescue if the knowledge of them had not been secure in you. Maybe I talk too much about myself. So you see there, it's really interesting, actually. See, Jung is trying to understand himself. He's trying to understand this inner experience. He's trying to find himself. And I can relate so much to that in my own story. Trying to find yourself. You don't know quite what you believe. I've heard Jung say he was frustrated with Freud because Freud, when he decided something, it was decisive and he knew a matter. But Jung, he says about himself, was doubting all along the line. Jung was someone who's very open minded but exploratory in his thoughts and his experiences. And it's interesting. He mentions here, you know, these dreams, how they burned in my soul and drove me to all the boldest acts of daring and forced me to push for the steepest summit. Yes, even to rise above myself. Um, I just want to share some dreams I had too while I'm just sharing my experience. And I guess part of this is my inner experience of my journey, um, following that inner experience. And so back, like I said, that first, I mean, I've dreamed my whole life, but when in my dream journal, the 11-year dream journal, when I had that first dream after going to that place, and I had that dream saying new wine, new wine, new wine, it was just a voice, very characteristic. Um, I think about, I don't know, maybe it was a year or 2 years later. It was around that time period. I had another dream, and I was climbing this high mountain, and I realized as I was climbing this mountain that I was very high up, and that people below, for some reason, I knew they didn't know what I knew at this kind of point on the mountain. And there was this plaque, had this little kind of piece of metal with something etched in it, a plaque at this point in the mountain. And I walked over to the plaque, and on it was the name, and the name said it was just Jesus Christ on this plaque, on this name. And I thought at that very point, I thought to myself, I know, I know what Jesus Christ is. And then it was very peculiar because I thought my thoughts after that was, but all below who have not reached this point on the mountain do not know. They do not know what this means, this revelation. But then another thought happened, and I thought, oh, but I'm not at the top of the mountain. I'm only climbing up. So I thought to myself, I must not know what else is up there. There is more to know than what I know right now. And that was the dream. And that's when I was deeply steeped in literalist Christianity. And so I always kind of held that with me a little bit. And I thought, there must be more to know. And then you would ask the question, but what would in from a Christian's perspective, what would there be more to know than Jesus Christ? See, it's interesting. The dream is taking you and helping you. It's helping you where you're at. So at that point, I was a literalist Christian and I was dreaming every night and writing down all my dreams. But the dream symbol is saying, but there's more to know. And it's still acknowledging, it's not like downplaying what I know. It's saying, actually, you know something special. Other people don't know that. That's why you're on the mountain and there's people lower don't know what you're experiencing. But there is more to learn. And I thought to myself, wow, that is really interesting. I thought maybe what's above is the Father, at that point. That's what I was trying to rationalize or think about. And then I've had many, many interesting dreams across 11 years, obviously. But another interesting dream um, that I think links to this inner experience. Because that first dream was just a voice, remember that I said that said new wine, new wine, new wine? There's only one other time I had a dream years and years after that. I think it was like 10, oh, I don't know, 8 years later or something. I can't really quite remember. I can't count it all in my head. Probably 8 years later, I had a dream with the same voice come back. And it was just a voice again, just like that first time when I dreamed every night for 2 years straight, 5 times a night. This time the voice said in the dream, Armadale, Armadale, Armadale. And I woke up and thought, what the hell? like, like, what the hell is that? You know? And I wrote it down faithfully. You have to write it down faithfully, right? And then I just went on my day. I was like, what the hell was that? So um then I was at work later that day and I worked in like a sales job at that time. And yeah, I've had many different jobs in my life. I mean, I could go through that. It's just an outward expression of my experiences, but I'm talking more about my inward experiences at the moment. And so, uh, yeah, I went to the my work, and someone asked me, "Oh, what are you studying?" Because they thought of my job as like not very good or something, so they assumed I was studying. And I had just finished some study like probably months earlier, but I just said, "Oh, I'm studying this." I just made it up because I did, advertising, and I said, "Oh," I did a master's of advertising, and I said I was studying advertising. And then I said, "What are you studying?" And she said, "Yes, I'm studying, health science," or something like that. And then someone else overheard our conversation and came over and said, "Oh, you're studying advertising, so you wanna destroy the world, and she's studying health science, she wants to help the world." And then he, like, left. And then I thought to myself, I was going back home and I was thinking to myself, that's interesting. Like going back to this idea of reconciling yourself to the world. I was still working that problem out. What am I doing really? And so, and then I was talking to, so I was in this mode of what the hell do I do? And what do you do when you don't know what to do? That's the question, right? And Jung answers this question. And he basically says, well, you look at your dreams, don't you? So I was like, okay, I'll look. What the hell was my dream? My last dream that I had. I was like, oh yeah, it was the voice. That same voice I heard 8 years ago in my dream that said new wine, new wine, new wine. And I dreamed every night for 2 years, 5 times a night. Um, it was the same voice, but this time I said Armadale. And I said it to my friend's mum and I said, Armadale, what does that mean? She was like, there's a university there. I was like, what? University? So I looked it up. And then I'd remembered this was a university I'd looked back at like 2 years prior maybe, and I'd looked it up to try to do a fast track psychology course. So inevitably my unconscious has said, well, and there was actually other dreams when I look back to through my dream journal, about university, and I studied those dreams very carefully. And I came to the conclusion that the dream meant and told me to study psychology. So that's basically when I went to formally study psychology. And I signed up and that's actually when the pandemic hit. The pandemic hit. Oh no, I signed up and did some prerequisite courses for like a year, but they were just like prerequisites. So it wasn't like a full load. I was just working and studying a little bit. But then the pandemic hit and I quit work and I studied just full time during that period while everything was shut down. And it was like one of the most intense and best things that I ever did in my life. I love that year. 2020 for me was fantastic because I it was so hard but so rewarding. Every day, day and night, all I did was study. All I did. All I did was read. If I wasn't reading, I was writing. I was doing an assignment. I was learning. I didn't do You ask my friend who lived with me, I did nothing but that. That's all I did day and night for a whole year. That's when I grew that big moustache. You remember if you've been watching my channel for a while, that's when I grew that big moustache. And that's when I just was developing this discipline of just doing my own thing and just being like, I don't care what's going on out there. I'm just growing my moustache and I'm just learning psychology. But there's something about that that helped me a lot. And then, there's been a few transitions since then about what I've been doing. And, I went on and I got into honors for psychology. And so I did my own scientific experiments and I completed my honors, but I didn't ultimately go on to become a psychologist. But I completed my studies and then I basically got a job in the government, really. And so that's where I'm at now as far as my outward life. But my inward life persists. So just like Jung has said before in here, it's interesting. He said, I found you where I believed you, the furthest away from me, where God forced me to surrender blindfolded and lose myself. There you climbed out of golden shafts and I found you again. So there is this interesting thing about being led by the inner self and not really knowing what you're doing. You don't really know what you're doing. Like you're kind of fumbling about in the dark and you're following an inner experience. And that's what Jung meant by individuation. Individuation wasn't really adaptation to the outside world, it was actually adaptation to the inner world. But Jung also did say that some people are just as introverted as extroverted in a sense. So you can be very well adapted to the outside world and the inner world. And ultimately, you would assume that that's ideal, right? Because in that sense, in that scenario, you've reconciled the extroversion with the introversion in that sense. But it's not something that you can just explain. It's something that you have to live through and understand through your lived experience. That's the way I kind of see that process. Any any process where you're kind of like reconciling two different aspects of yourself is always going to require um, lived experience. Uh, there's only so much you can learn through head knowledge. You can learn a lot from reading from other people, especially if you're doing certain things like in business and all that stuff. You learn a lot from other people and you improve. But as far as your inner journey of becoming yourself, um, because you're embarking on a pathway that no one else has gone before, you have to trust in some sense, you have to trust yourself, or the only other way to say it in the old language is trust God, really. Um, because you don't know where you're going in some sense. And that doesn't mean you can't have like outward plans, but ultimately the unconscious is more powerful than your rational construction of any plan that you will create in your life. In the book of Proverbs in the Bible, it actually says Plans are, um, you know, plans are for the man to make, but the heart, but the purpose of the Lord will prevail, or something like that. Um, and so psychologically, it means that the unconscious is always in control. And actually, I had these certain experiences um, where, see, I always thought actually that we have more control over our lives. But the more I live, I'm actually tilting more towards the conclusion that we have maybe some control, in some sense, like maybe we can think about certain things out of our own will. But ultimately, I kind of feel like ultimately we don't. And because of that, it's more about like trying to discover and reflect on ourselves on on where we're being led and how we're being led to, like, what is our underlying myth in that sense. Others have said it that way. What is our underlying myth? What myth are we living? Um, what's our personal story that keeps repeating itself? And I feel like I've had lots of different stories. So I feel like I have broken out of different stories and overcome them. But you're never finished. You're always in another part of the play, so to speak. You're always living out another chapter of your life. And yeah, it's really interesting. So that's a little bit myself, a little bit about Jung and his stuff. It's coming up on an hour now. I've got 9 people watching. Maybe I will stay on for longer. Maybe I'll just keep going. We'll keep going. All right. So let's see what else we got here. What's the time? Okay, it's getting late. Probably have to go to bed soon. Got to go to work tomorrow. You see what I mean? If I didn't have to work tomorrow, I'd be up all night talking to you guys. No, but that's fine. Okay, let's go on a little bit more with Jung's black books. Okay. Forgive me. My heart is full because I have come from far wandering. I wandered for 11 years, so long that I forgot that I possessed a soul that I could call my own. I belonged to men and things. I did not belong to myself. You see, that's what I'm talking about, basically. There's this struggle between your inner experiences and your outer experiences, right? Between yourself and society. So, yeah, I'll read that little part again. I belonged to men and things. I did not belong to myself. And Jung said for 11 years he wandered. It reminds me of the Bible, that biblical story of how many ever years they wandered in the desert. It's like an archetypal idea of not being in touch with your inner value, your inner soul. Um, it's really interesting. Okay, I'll continue reading. Where were you all this time? Which beyond sheltered you and gave you sanctuary, where you did not starve to death? How did you fare? Oh, that you must speak through me, that my speech and I are a symbol for you. How should I decipher you? Who are you, child? You recently know that you have used this image in my dreams, the image of a little girl, and I found you again, only through the soul of the woman. Childish interpretation shall be far from me, because I must prize the image that you use. How dare I guess about this? What do I know of your mystery? Look, I bear a wound that as yet is not healed. My ambition to make an impression. Hence, close my mouth and keep all my words inside of you. They are directed toward you. Do not believe that I am selfish. I will bend everything in me to alert those I love to the depths and heights that you hold and hide in your child's hand. Forgive me if I speak as in a dream, like a drunkard. Are you God? Is God a child, a female child? I must tell myself most clearly, does he use the image of a child that dwells in every man's soul? Where Horace, Tagus, and Christ, not children, Dionysus and Hercules were also divine children. Did Christ, the God of man, not call himself the Son of Man? What was his innermost thought in doing so? Should the daughter of man be God's name? Forgive me if I babble. No one else hears me. I speak to you quietly, and you know that I am not a drunkard, and that my heart twists in pain from the stabbing wound, whose darkness delivers speeches full of mockery. You're staring in your own comedy. You're starring in your own comedy. You're lying to yourself. You spoke so as to deceive others and make them believe in you. You want to be a prophet and chase after your ambition. All right, let's just stop there for that because I've got some thoughts on this, which is really interesting. So you can see that there's this inner wrestling between this inner symbology of this child in his dreams and his experiences of um, divinity and his outward ambition to be a prophet, to be someone he says to make an impression, my ambition to make an impression. And that really is the outward extroverted function of our lives. We want to make an impression. We want to, um, impress upon other people how good we are, what we can do. I'll show you what I can do, especially if you're a person of excellence, like Jung was, someone who has a lot of creative potential, someone who's highly capable. They're going to want to showcase that capability, right? To impress other people. Um, and so there's something interesting about that. And also his dream symbology. I've had dreams too, of an inner child as well myself when he talks about Christ was a child and that Hercules was a child. Um, I had this dream actually. Uh, yes, it was a very alchemical dream. And basically, I was flying around, like hovering in the sky, um, which some probably might interpret that as inflation. I don't know. I don't quite interpret it that way, but maybe. Um, but I was flying, and actually, there was an Indian family. For some reason, there's something about India in my dreams. I've had Indian words like appear in my dreams that link to like these Indian myths on like ancient kings and stuff. It is weird. Because I look it up later, I'm like, what the hell? This word appeared in my dream. Literally, is like the last name of some line of some line of kings or something. Um. Anyway, the idea in this dream was I was floating in the air, and I was in. There was this Indian family who was in this shop, like this corner store, and they were like, "Oh, look, he's floating," and I was like, "Oh, no, I better get out of here because the family spotted me." So I started floating out of the shop, and I hid away behind this wall, and I looked over, and there was a child, and the child knew for some reason, I knew the child knew what was going on because there was a battle taking place between these big figures, and they kinda looked like, Transformers. They were just these beings. They weren't people. They were like these beings were fighting, And this boy knew what was going on, and he was hiding there with me. And then I grabbed 3 of these beings and chucked them into a furnace. Um, and then in the furnace, the greater being split its power between the other 2 beings. So it transferred its power over to the other 2 beings. And then those other 2 beings melded together. And there was this color purple throughout all of that. And then at the very end, I saw it turned into a hermaphrodite, basically, is what happened. And yeah, this is a few years ago now. I had that dream, but I found that dream very significant symbology about the reconciliation of opposites, the inner child, um, and the alchemical process of the transfer of power and libido to different functions to ultimately combine together in the symbology in the symbol of the hermaphrodite, which is a symbol of the primordial being, the primordial ground of being, which all things come through, but it also is a symbol of what it points towards. In Jung's work, he says something like that. It's not just a symbol of where we came from, which is what you think of as the primordial, right? Where we came from, the past, the origin. But the hermaphrodite is also a symbol of something that occurs in the future, of something ahead. And so it's an interesting thing there. I can't remember where that passage is, but I do remember reading that in Jung, something like that. Um, so anyway, um, yes. So the symbology of the inner child. And then lately, oh, also I had this other dream that there was the father, my father. I had a dream of my father and I was beating him in the face. Um, but I beat him in the face so much that he turned into a young boy. So inevitably, it was a symbol of transformation. It was a symbol that transformed. So yeah, symbols of transformation, which is what the book is called now. And it used to be called, what was it? Transformations of the libido, something like that. Um, so yeah, I think that these inner things are very interesting. And the concept, Jung's concept of the libido is like so powerful because it's a broader explanatory power um, of the psychodynamics of the mind. And it really explains and tracks. It helps you explain your inner experiences so well. Like, I don't believe one bit that I dreamt those dreams with those symbols because I know about Jung. Because I didn't really even study much about the hermaphrodite at that point at all. I studied it after I had the dream because I was like, hermaphrodite, I've heard of it and I knew it was somewhere in there, some symbol, but I didn't know about what it really meant. And the exactness of the narrative structure of the stories, with the creatures that get thrown into the furnace that have the transfer of power, the greater giving the power to the lesser, and then them coming back together, explained the libido process, um, even expressed in Nietzsche as well, where he explains it like the libido splits, the instincts split against itself to fight against itself to create this tension um, of opposites, and that tension of opposites basically creates power or greatness because you're able to hold this tension between two conflicting aspects of your personality, and only those who are whole or larger or bigger in who they are, who are capable, are able to hold that tension within themselves. And I think that's what Jung also was experiencing. He went into these inner experiences in the black books, but at the same time, you can see in the writings, he's doubting himself. He's saying, "Oh, these are but my weak kind of fantasies I have, and oh, but my outside life, I was seeking ambition, and I know there's this inner value in my soul. And so it's this conflict between all this stuff, the outer life that we have versus the inner life and experience. And I think that that is like something we always are going to wrestle with in some sense, maybe until we reach just this. I mean, I've had many inner experiences, but maybe you have to reach a point, like Jung said, where you've got that trade off and you're able to kind of be free from those outward obligations. But even as Jung is older, in his 40s, mid 40s, he still writes sometimes that he was obligated to work and go and do different conferences and meetings and different things. And that led him away from his inner work. But he had to do it for compensation, he says. So if you're feeling kind of right now that you are caught up in things in your life, in the outward world, take heart in a sense, you know, that at the right time, those little times when you like before bed, I find is like really good because it's kind of like you're just ready to kind of go into your unconscious basically. Um, Kind of like prayer, I guess, but just acknowledge and just say to yourself, wherever I'm meant to be, let it be, no matter the consequences, no matter what kind of I'm dealing with, you know? And I think that there's something about that that the unconscious latches onto, you know, um, because there is this interplay between your conscious mind and the unconscious. It's not just a one-way street, as I said before. It is kind of, and that's why I'm not completely sold or sure on whether we have complete free will or not. I'm not willing to say we absolutely don't, because there is some interesting aspect to consciousness. Consciousness isn't just epiphenomenal either. It's not just like nothing in light. Like, yes, the unconscious is a vast thing, but your conscious experience exists and is something, right? So your consciousness plays a role as an interplay to relate with your unconscious, and that helps you navigate through your life. Because if you never paid attention to your unconscious, your life is completely determined by unconscious forces in a certain sense. But I'm kind of open to the idea because Jung, you know, says the whole thing about, you know, um, I can't remember what the saying is right now. It's getting late, but it's basically about if you're not conscious of the unconscious, then it will direct you, and you'll call it fate, right? And so I think there's also something interesting in saying, but what if you really do discover what the unconscious is about? What if that happens? Well, then there's an interplay now. There's an interplay between your conscious attitude and your unconscious. And there's also a danger in allowing your unconscious to take too much flow over your life, you know, and just like allowing the archetypal powers from the libido, these complexes, I guess, to take over and just you know, seep into your mind too much to take you away. So I think there's something to be said to forging like a strong life in the real world. And that's kind of like a real Nietzschean approach, right? Is it's saying yes to life, approaching life as if it is important. But at the same time, when you look at all different religions, there's a strong asceticism, which is like a hiding away, a cutting away from life. And I think it really depends on the individual, and it really depends on who you are. And I've made videos lately about kind of that. I made a video and had all this train imagery in it for some reason. I think the train imagery in those videos resemble like the libido or something like that, basically. And the inner life, the inner experience, and maybe the instinct. because it's stuck on a track. There's not much deviation from a train. Um, so yeah. Anyway, it's getting quite late. I've got probably 15 minutes before I'll end this, but I might just end a little bit on reading off this passage from Jung. Might as well end it there. Um, okay, so blessed is he who has also overcome his own mockery. But you see that the wound still bleeds, and that I am far from being able to pretend that I do not hear my own mockery. I bring it before both you and me and leave it and go on, because I feel that I must speak to you from myself and through myself from you. So obviously, Jung is feeling kind of a bit embarrassed about this in himself, his own mockery. He's fantasizing his soul and he's talking to himself with himself. So he's saying, you know, pretend that I do not hear my own mockery. So part of his mind is like, what the hell are you doing, you idiot? You're just speaking to yourself. You're doing nothing. All this kind of dreaming, all this searching for this inner experience is doing you no good. Look at how your life's turning out. Look at all the, um, you know, troubles you have. And remember, in the Bible, it said, the seed that lands on the thorny ground is like the person who is troubled by the world, and the seed doesn't take um, like root, right? So it's all psychological language for like the psychodynamics of the mind of this inner experience. So don't despise these things. You might feel, oh, I'm embarrassed about this, you know, and but that's okay. I think it's all right. Depends who you are. Some people are not embarrassed. They just, shamelessly go their way, and yeah, I think it's just each to their own. So let's continue here. Again and again, I think of those amazing, torturous paths that led to you, my child. How strange it sounds to me to call you a child. You who still hold the all without end in your hand. I am thinking of this first vision that you gave me in a dream, where I saw you hovering. Is it 14 years since then? How thick and darkness was back then. How impetuous and how egotistic my passion was. How subjugated I was by all the diamonds of ambition, the desire for glory, greed, uncharitableness, and zeal at that time, and how totally ignorant I was then. Life tore me away, and I deliberately moved away from my soul, and I have done so for all these years. But I remained with you minimally until the love for women tore me completely off and away from you. I recognize how good all of this was, but I thought that you were lost, or sometimes it seems to me that I was lost. But you were not lost, nor was I. I went on the dusty way of the day. You went invisibly with me and guided me step by step, putting the pieces together meaningfully and letting me see the whole and ultimate in each part. See, there's something really interesting about that. I have to speak more about that. Um, see, Nietzsche had this idea uh, of the organizing idea that's deep down, and this organizing idea within you leads you through all these different aspects of your life. And so he says here, like, um, you were invisibly with me and guided me step by step, putting the pieces together meaningfully and letting me see the whole and ultimate in each part. So each aspect of your life, you will get distracted. He gets distracted by women, he gets distracted by ambition. He does this, he does that out in the world, right? I've done the same thing. I remember when I was younger and yeah, I've been very distracted by women in my early when my early I guess my teens and my early 20s. Then not so much as I went after my mid-20s, not so much, but still distracted by things in the world, trying to do this, trying to do that. Um, but ultimately, it all is like a tapestry, and you're being weaved through this beautiful picture of your story like a mandala. You're slowly creating this story, and each little aspect of your life, every little thing you've done, the inner unconscious part of you is expressing that symbol or that shape. You can picture it like a mandala. Whatever the shape looks like is you. It is the totality of your life expressed in a certain way throughout how you lived your life. And there's something interesting about that, um, that I think is so important. And ultimately, there's a meaning derived from this process. I think that gives us this kind of buttress against nihilism, against hopelessness. A lot of people have actually said to me in my Dark Night of the Soul video, um, that I had given them hope. I had articulated thoughts in such a way that I had given them hope. And, you know, I just feel like I um, really, appreciate that, because hope is everything in a certain sense, especially when you're in despair. Hope is everything. And if you have or see the inner experience and its meaning that it gives to you as you're going through your life, that inner meaning comes with what's called life. Really, like I remember this passage of, I think Jesus says, you'll have life and life abundantly, or like he breathes the Holy Spirit into them or something. It's like this idea psychologically of the libido giving you this energy and life through the interconnecting meaning of the synchronicity of your life paths coming together. Right. Lauren, hope and insight. That's right. It often does give you insight. You're right. And that insight comes to this inner knowing, um, that makes you see a way. And you might not know completely how to solve something, but the hope gives you a way, to move forward. And the hope comes from the experience of the inner meaningful experience. And I think it's about paying attention, um, to the inner life, to the inner experience, the inner guide. Um, and that's what can give you intrinsic meaning, you know. Okay, so let's keep going on here. There's one more paragraph left here. You took away where I thought to take hold. You gave me where I did not expect anything. And time and again, you brought about fate from new and unexpected quarters. Where I sowed, you robbed me of the harvest, and where I did not sow, you gave me fruit 100-fold. And time and again, I lost the path and found it again where I would never have foreseen it. You uphold my belief when I was alone and near despair. At every decisive moment, You let me believe in myself. I think the thing is, I didn't even pre-read that. So you can see what we've been talking about um, live. It all just comes together. And I think that Jung summed it up really well just there. So thanks to everyone for watching. I hope to make more content, but I was feeling a bit stifled and I didn't know what to create. So I mean, I do. I've got lots of ideas. I create more ideas than you would even dream to imagine what I'm doing over here. Like I've got like a list of like 200 things. I'm like literally like but then I just think I don't know what I'm doing and I'm get busy and I got to do all this stuff. So I thought I would just come online, do it live, just come out here raw. I guess I've shared some personal things. I probably overshared my personal experiences, but look, maybe it's in good, generous spirit that I do that because Jung didn't publish his black books. This isn't even the red book. The red book wasn't even published. These are his private journals, and I guess me sharing some of my private experiences can go along with Jung sharing his private experiences. And so we can all laugh at each other and laugh at ourselves as we all look like fools along this process. So, I'm not here to say this is the way or this is what we should do. I'm just another dreamer, just like you. All right, guys, keep dreaming. I love you all. I thank you so much. And yeah, we'll do it again. We'll do it again. Bye bye.